This is Mellissa Thomas with Florida National News, here with Orange Soil and Water Conservation Supervisor Michael Barber, who is the supervisor for District 1 here in Orange County. Thank you so much for taking the time. We really
Absolutely.
appreciate it.
Very happy to do it.
Awesome. So let's, for our audience, just kind of give them a better idea of what the Soil and Water Conservation District does.
Right. So Orange County Soil and Water District was created back when most of them were created, all about the same time after the Great Dust Bowl, when it became very obvious that there needed to be some changes made in agriculture and conservation of both soil and water resources. And so the soil and water districts were created through a federal program, but then they had to be actually put into existence by legislation state by state. So what the soil and water districts are primarily responsible for primarily is a lot of outreach. They were created to go into the communities and to help teach best practices. One of the things that contributed to the Great Dust Bowl back in the 30s was a lot of farmers weren't doing proper crop rotation, things like that. So a lot of what the soil and water conservation districts do is outreach and community education, and that's a lot of what we still do today. We try to go out in the community, we try to really bring best techniques, new methods, things like that, give them to the community. A lot of outreach, when the local communities and the local municipalities or counties will pass new ordinances and legislation. We like to go out there and try to help get the word around. For instance, in Orange County, in the last couple of years, they passed new ordinance dealing with fertilizers. When it could be applied, where it could be applied. For people who were in the landscaping profession, had to have certain permits. And so we try to get the word out there and help educate the relevant parties in the community about that. Another good example would be the work we do with even schools. We do things like envirothons where we go out and work with high school students and help them understand more about the environment and best practices. And so we really do a lot of community outreach. Is primarily why we were created, and it's still primarily a lot of what we do today.
And talk to our audience, do you guys do a lot, since the Soil and Water Conservation District is a state agency, do you associate with other state governing bodies?
So the Florida statute that created the Soil and Water Conservation Districts specifically talks about this. And in the statute, it encourages us to work with other governmental agencies, both local level, state level, and even other counties. There are specific provisions dealing with how we can deal with soil and water districts from other counties. Specifically lays out guidelines for how we can deal with state agencies, county agencies, municipality agencies, and we really are supposed to work with them in tandem to further our goals.
And talk a little bit about the change that you've seen throughout Orange County during your time as supervisor.
Well, absolutely. I think there's been a lot of good cooperation between the Orange County Soil and Water Board and not just the county government as a whole, which there has been, but also in individual municipalities, especially the city of Orlando. They've been really great partners of ours. They've worked with us on numerous initiatives that we worked on. We do a lot of volunteer work where we actually don't get state funding, and the statute no longer allows for us to levy any sort of taxes. So we run primarily off donations and volunteer power. And so we work with some of these other agencies to get volunteers out to do things like clean up our local parks, our lakes, our streams. There's been a lot of cooperation with the city of Orlando when it comes to things like preserving certain parks, that sometimes developers want to come in, they want to develop, and we've gotten a lot of cooperation from them. Mayor Dyer has been a really big champion of ours. He's really helped us with a lot of our conservation goals, and so have a lot of the city commissioners and county commissioners all throughout our county.
Absolutely, absolutely. And of course, outside of this, we know you're also an attorney, so talk about that sort of balance between your duties here and like your actual job as an attorney.
Well, there's a lot to balance. I am an attorney. I'm also the soil and water supervisor, and of course, I'm a husband. I'm a father, right. So I wear a lot of different hats. Obviously, being an attorney is, it's a very time-consuming job, and it's not something you can really do part-time. You have to be there for your clients, and I try to. So, when I do take time away out of a work day to come here for a soil and water meeting, typically I'll go in over the weekend, and I'll make that time up. That way, I'm able to put in my service to my community. At the same time, I'm not taking away any of the time and attention from my clients that they deserve. As far as being a father and a husband, when I get done here at these meetings, I go home. I have to help out with my daughter as well, with my wife, and it's a lot to balance, but I enjoy it. I enjoy doing the civic service. I enjoy my work as a lawyer. Every day I get to wake up and I know I'm going out there and I'm defending the Constitution, and I'm defending people's civil rights, and I feel really good about that. And when I come here, it's a different type of work than what I practice in my law practice. But same thing, I get to come here and I get to fight every day for the environment, fight for the rights of the citizens of Orange County to live in a place where we put value on conserving our natural resources, our soil and our water. And so, with both of those, even though they're different types of work, I get a lot of value out of both, and it's worked. Luckily, I work at a law firm. It's called Lindsay and Ferry, where the partners there, they encourage me to do this. They really like that I give back to the community. They're very big on giving back to the community themselves, and so I've not felt any pressure to, I haven't felt any of the pressure at work from taking the time away to come and do this. If anything, they've been very supportive.
That's good. That's good to know. And kind of piggybacking off of that, what first inspired you to get involved with the Soil and Water Conservation District? Because of course it's an elected position. You had to campaign for it, but like, what first made you say, I want to run for that office?
So I was born and raised here in Orange County. My family's been here for a while, and I was raised as an outdoor kid. I was part of that. Born in the '80s. We always like to joke we're the last generation that grew up playing in the streets and playing in the woods.
Seriously.
And even as I got to as an adult, our biggest hobbies are all outdoors. We like to kayak, we like to hike, we like to go on bike rides. And as much as I understand that Orlando is a vibrant and growing city and development is inevitable, and it's also something that's, it's laudable if it's done the right way, I also watched a lot of the fields and the forests I used to play in as a child get developed over. A lot of the streams are no longer there. I used to have a natural spring out back, a tiny little cold water spring we used to play in. It's all been developed over. And, I realized to me it was important to try to do something to strike a balance, to preserve and conserve as much of our wild lands, our forests, our streams, our lakes, our rivers, our agricultural land for future generations, while at the same time developing in a smart way and developing in a responsible way. And I thought, I could really make a difference and come in and try to strike harmony between the two. And that was the main thing that really motivated me to run for this position.
Awesome. So from the perspective of a soil water conservation supervisor, I know you were saying the primary duty is to increase awareness and education, but how does the district affect legislation?
So we don't directly get to legislate. We're not a legislative body.
Right.
What we do, though, is we try to stay very involved. We build relationships with our local legislators who represent us in Tallahassee, and as well as other legislators throughout the state. And we try to leverage those relationships to at least get input on the legislation. When there's legislation that is already being worked on, we will try to pass resolutions, write letters telling them we support it, maybe even getting suggestions for things that we would like to see in it. Likewise, when there's legislation we don't agree with, whether it's at a state level or it's a county or municipal ordinance, same thing. We'll have discussion here. We'll bring people in from the community. We'll hear from them, public comment. We'll hear testimony. We've had experts come in, testify for us. And after we've gathered the facts, same thing. We'll let it be known that if we don't agree with it, we'll do the same thing. We'll pass resolutions, which of course are non-binding on them, but we'll pass them anyways. We'll write very nice letters. Sometimes they're a little more stern than others, and we'll send them off and try to let them know, hey, we are also elected officials. We have a mandate to be looking after the conservation of the soil and water and other natural resources of our county, and this is what we think about that particular piece of legislation. So we don't get to directly influence it, but we do get to put in our word.
So basically, in a nutshell, for our audience,
yes,
the district serves as that environmental voice for the citizens of Orange County, for the residents of Orange County.
I like to see it that way. There are many other organizations, governmental organizations, that deal with the environment, but we're the only ones that are directly elected by the people. There are the water management boards, for instance, the St. John's Water Management Board, the South Florida Water Management Board, but those are elected positions. They're elected by the governor. They don't directly represent the will of the people. Same thing where in the counties you'll have have a Department of Environmental Protection, same thing on the state level. Those people are also appointed by the executives that run those particular governments, whether it's state, county, or even municipal. We are the only ones that are directly elected by the people. Therefore, we think that our voice is their voice, and we are given their voice to these issues when we talk to the legislature.
Absolutely. I'm going to speak to a couple of environmental issues here. There's been recent discussions now about water, the possibility of water scarcity, especially in the next decade or so. Like, give us your personal thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something that is very concerning. There's even been ongoing litigation that seems to have been ongoing almost my entire life, between us and Georgia over, natural flows of different rivers. We all know and we hear all the time about the aquifer levels dropping. We've seen an increase of sinkholes. We've seen lake levels receding as well. I definitely think it's something that needs to be dealt with. One of the things we can do, once again, is a lot of outreach. There's a lot of things everyday people can do that can really help out with this. They can install more efficient appliances in their house, more efficient toilets. People could just learn to, we can get the word out there to set timers and have water sensors for people's sprinklers. Mm-hmm. I drive around all the time, and you'll be in the middle of a rainstorm, and you'll just drive past a house with the sprinklers on. Things like that can be very frustrating. There's not much we can do to enforce or any sort of legislation ourselves. We don't really have the power to write tickets or to, we're not code enforcement. Right. But at the same time, there's a lot we can do about education and outreach. And, it's not something that can be solved just by one specific governmental agency. People will talk about, well, it's a state problem or it's a local problem. Really, it's a problem for everyone. It's going to take all the citizens being a little bit better with their water use in order for us to have in order for us to be able to avoid the water scarcity issues in the future. We are growing. We're one of the fastest growing states. Central Florida is one of the fastest growing regions in the whole country. And when people move here, they're going to start taking up more water. We have to find a way to conserve it better.
Yeah, and that's actually a perfect transition into my next question, especially with what you said about what you witnessed when you were growing up and seeing a lot of the natural resources get developed over. Like, what are your thoughts on the current rate of development? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the current rate of development has been almost astonishing. I mean, Orlando's completely changed since in the past 30-something years since I've been a kid. I mean, orange groves and fields and forests are all neighborhoods now. It's obviously changed a lot. It's been a breathtaking pace, of course. Orlando has benefited a lot from all the people who have moved here, a very diverse and vibrant community, and development is inevitable. We just need to be smart about it. We need to make sure we're developing in a way that does conserve and preserve as much of our natural resources as possible. Obviously, there's been a lot of towers going up in downtown the last couple of decades. Vertical development comes with its own sets of issues, but one thing it does allow us for is it takes up less surface area. One of the big issues we've seen with water scarcity is that when we pave over too much surface area, there's not enough land left over for the water to percolate down and recharge the aquifer. So at the rate that we've seen the development, it definitely does cause some concern about whether we're going to leave enough land there in order to continue recharging the aquifer and avoid a lot of these water scarcity issues in the future.
And last question, what is your vision? What would you like to see enacted? What would you like to accomplish? So, I mean, there's a whole lot. I mean, that's a big question. We could sit here all day talking about that. I mean, there's a lot of different initiatives that we would like to see. There's a lot of things dealing with pollution. For instance, there's been a big push to get rid of, plastic straws and foam and things like that. And that's something that we've been very active in and we've really pushed for. And we'd love to see more legislation and cooperation from the cities, counties, and states with that. We've gotten a lot of great feedback on that individually from different municipalities. It's still a very big work in progress on within the state as a whole, but we have received a lot of support back from that from a lot of our local politicians. As far as things specific to water conservation, one of the big problems is not just the amount of water. We've been talking about water scarcity. It's water quality. Yes. Obviously, the last year, there's been headlines, not just dominating our local newspapers and our state newspapers, but nationally, even internationally. I mean, there's BBC had articles about our red tide and about our discharges from Lake Okeechobee, as well as our blue-green algae. So I would like to see more legislation, and I think a lot of that's going to have to be on a statewide level and in cooperation with the federal government. But I'd like to see more done, more legislation passed to try to help alleviate those problems.